Australia's very own Alexander Volkanovski versus America's Brian Ortega. I'm going to break down how this fight will go and how I believe it'll play out. I will lay out a few of the things that the fighters like to do, their moves and their go-to stuff, and then I will lay out their weaknesses and what the other individual can do. Then towards the end, I will have my final verdict. Let's outline a few things that Alexander Volkanovski does great. Now, he is a smaller fighter and he has a lot of aggression, which is great, which makes him go forward. But what allows him to do that is the feints that he uses and the way he does his movement. He's making you think about a lot of things, yeah? He does his feints into the kicks, feints into his punches. Now, a few great things that he does is he chops the leg a lot doing those calf kicks. He likes to also feint in with the inside leg kicks. Now, a great combo that he does a lot, jab into an inside leg kick, which is one of his favorite combos that he likes to utilize. Plus, he uses, even though he is the shorter fighter, he utilizes his lead hand to gauge the range onto what he can do. He's great at getting out of the way and also great at entering in and pouncing in. He likes to utilize his leg kicks such as calf kicks, as most of you know, that's a thing nowadays. As Alexander fights, he doesn't predominantly stay in orthodox. He likes to dip into southpaw as well. But what I did notice is that he only stays in southpaw for a short amount of time. A few of Alexander's go-to moves and the things to look out for are the jab inside leg kick. He utilizes this very well and did it against Max Holloway in most of his fights and did it in most of his other fights as well. But he's great at stepping in range and getting into that inside leg kick, but then also backing out. Another thing that he does is a switch to southpaw and throws out right overhand, or right hook to say. So he switches and steps in aggressively. I can't do it obviously because I don't have a lot of room, but that's a lot of forward momentum that he uses and pushes his opponent back and counters off it as well. In saying that, he sets these up by angling and using the lead hand to gauge his range and distance. A few things that Ortega should look out for is whenever Alexander goes for his strikes, he always dips his head down. Now, he did great against Frankie Edgar to come up with the uppercut, and he is a very tricky opponent, such as the elbows and the knees that he does in his fights. So if he can time this very well and produce an uppercut or a knee, something that's coming upwards as Alexander lowers his level, it would be a great tool to use. Now, Alexander does move a lot and he cuts a lot of angles. In order for Ortega to stop that movement, he should chop away at the legs and try and slow that movement down and control it in his pace. Now, as I said, Alexander is great going forward, but going backwards, it's seen throughout his fights that he doesn't do too well going backwards. He still strikes and throws, but he is more comfortable and better when he comes forward. So Ortega should aim to try and push Alexander back if he can. Now, I did say that Alexander moves a lot. He cuts the angles to the left and he cuts the angles to the right. In saying this, Max Holloway did it in the second fight, but if he can time him moving left or right, he should mix it up with a spinning heel kick or a spinning elbow if he gets him very close, which Ortega is great at doing. Another thing to make Alexander back off, Ortega should interrupt these shots as Alexander enters in. Max did this in his second fight against Alexander very great, and it made Alexander go backwards. This will put Ortega on the front foot. He must interrupt these shots as he comes in. Now on to Brian Ortega. He does great by utilizing the Philly shell. It's not really seen in MMA, but he uses the Philly shell to roll some of his shots, which is amazing to see. Now, Ortega is a very tricky opponent, but if you've seen in his last fight against Korean Zombie, he was very cool, calm, and collected, which is great. But another thing that he utilized in that fight was a leap in side kick to the thigh, which is great. In saying that, in his stance, he just hops in and stomps the thigh area. Now, this will be great to stop Alexander from coming forward. Other than chopping his legs, he should utilize that. We've seen it against, Khalil Roundtree. He finished his opponent by doing this. It is a great tool to use. As dog as it seems, it is a fight at the end of the day. One thing that does separate Brian Ortega from Alexander Volkanovski is once they separate from the clinch, if you watch most of their fights, Alexander doesn't often throw something upon that disengagement, whereas Ortega, on the other hand, always aims to throw something and put something in your face upon the disengagement, which is a great thing that Brian Ortega does. Now, a few things that Ortega should look out for is in the last fight against Korean Zombie, he was swaying back and forth a lot. In his other fights, he moves a lot, but seeing the new reformed striking of Brian Ortega, he was swaying back and forth within the front leg and the back leg. If Alexander Volkanovski can time this, as it's a movement that's happening often and frequently, he'll be able to enter in. So he should change it up and try and give Alexander different looks, whether it's feinting himself or just doing other stuff to threaten Alexander. Now, speaking upon Ortega's cool, calm, and collectiveness, he is a very calculated fighter, but in order for him to be calculated, he needs the fight to slow down in pace. It's going to be interesting to see if Alexander's aggression and constant persistence will keep him calculated, or will he get flustered up and throw some crazy stuff, whether it's an elbow, uppercuts, or anything to that degree. Will he be able to think as much? Now, another thing that Ortega does, which is great, but it's going to be interesting against Alexander, is he reaches down to the thigh with his lead hand, just to threaten that single leg, or just to take down in general. Now, Alexander is a shorter opponent. It's going to be interesting to see if he will reach down that low to Alexander's leg. Now, Alexander being the shorter fighter, it's going to be interesting to see how Ortega will shoot in on him. Now, observing his last fight with Korean Zombie, he didn't shoot in successfully in terms of explosiveness. It was more of a reach. So when he shot in, he was reaching over like this, or reaching forward like this. He wasn't really dropping to a knee or explosively pushing off the back foot. If he does this against Alexander, I'm afraid he will get caught and put himself in severe danger. Now, a few things that I believe that Alexander should do is that if he wants Ortega to come forward, because I believe Alexander will be pushing him back, if he wants to counter him by making Brian Ortega come forward, he should chop the legs, because as we saw with Korean Zombie, his leg conditioning isn't that well. His leg durability isn't that well. So Alexander does use a lot of leg kicks, but if he utilizes that, he's got two options: either to keep eating the leg kicks and potentially be finished, or to come forward and start countering off it and push Alexander back. This is a great way to make Ortega to come forward. Now, we can say the fight will be similar to Ortega versus Edgar, but Alexander is such an evolved fighter. Edgar was just a boxer, so when he came in, he was doing a lot of rushing in jabs, crosses. He wasn't threatening him with anything else, such as a takedown or a high kick. This, on the other hand, Alexander, he will do. As he comes forward, he will end it with a kick, or he will start with a kick and end it with punches into a takedown. This would be a very interesting thing to see. In my opinion, I see this fight going towards Alexander Volkanovski. Don't get me wrong, Ortega is tough, but I just believe that Alexander is such a skilled fighter and way more reformed around the art of martial arts than Ortega. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and I hope to bring you guys more content. Have a good one.